go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/Jack.
So again, let yourself sit and be comfortable. In a way, the teachings, especially tonight, feels so, are a kind of a contemplation or a reflection for you to listen to, and you don't have to remember anything. There's no quiz at the end, no grades. But you can listen to see if it reminds you of something that's important, or in what way it might, and that's beautiful. And if it doesn't seem useful, some stuff, just let it go. It's probably wrong. Who knows? My daughter thinks so. But you can listen as a meditation in that way. And I guess I want to first start because it's, I don't know what you'd call it, Easter Monday or something like that. It's the Monday after Easter, and it's insanely wild spring out there from all that thankful March rain. And of course, Easter and Passover and all of the various kind of spring holidays with the eggs and the bunnies and things are really the ancient archetypal celebration of the renewal of life, of the fertility of life and the rebirth after a long winter. And one of the questions is, how do you navigate death and rebirth? Because there's a way in which we're all dying and being reborn all the time. I had the opportunity after a retreat recently to drive back into Woodacre. I now live in Fairfax, to the house which I had helped create and where I lived for 30 years. And it was kind of wild looking at it. It's lovely. A young couple are there who are about to have kids, and it's the perfect place for that. We raised our daughter. And I thought, wow, that was a life, wasn't it? And it's all gone. You know, and actually only a few people even remember what happened there and how it was created, and then that will be gone. And things are really, they appear, we experience them, and they're gone. Like your childhood, for example, you know, or Tutankhamun, or the dinosaurs, you know, or Y2K, if you remember that, you know, or you know, cassette tapes or whatever it is. It's like stuff happens and then it disappears. And what do we do with that? It seems that although we thought ourselves permanent, says the Buddha, we are not. Although we thought ourselves settled, we are not. Although we thought we would last forever, we will not. So that's some medicine there, isn't it? Yeah. But this is our human incarnation is designed this way. This is our human lot. And so how to deal with this? Now, there is in Colorado a woman who made a kind of ritual work of art that I talk about sometimes called the Salt Monument. She made a kind of temple for it, and in the middle is a giant glass or lucite crystal that turns every 24 hours, and it's filled with 7.5 billion crystals of salt, one for each human being on the earth. And as the priestess of the Salt Monument, every evening she goes in and takes this beautiful ritual container, and from the bottom of it pours out 200,000 grains of salt for the 200,000 people that died that day. Think about that, this day on earth. And she says some prayers over it and does a kind of ritual return to the earth. And then every morning she comes in and she pours in another ritual container of 250,000 grains of salt for the 250,000 babies that will be born that day. That's us. You know, we're coming and going, baby. That's just how it works, right? And our practice of mindfulness and loving awareness gives us the capacity to be with birth and death and change, the inevitability of it, from the place of a witnessing, loving awareness, or a place of balance or wisdom. Now, it ain't that easy. We live in a time of toxic politics, where there's a lot of fear and racism and terrorism and, all those things, and you look and you go, oh my gosh, what is happening, worldwide, terrorism, what's happening to the climate, what's happening in our politics, what's going to happen. That's on one side. And then on the other side, there's a million acts of goodness every single day, between gestures and care and the blooming trees of the spring and the unbearable beauty of the earth, along with the suffering and the greed and the idiocy and so forth. And we could have a small vision about it. There was a guy, I think he was a Texas oilman, not to say anything about Texas, but maybe a little bit about the brashness of it, who was wealthy, and he went to Picasso's studio to buy a Picasso because he could, and showing around, and he said to Picasso, why don't you paint things more like they are? Imagine saying that to him. I won't do the accent because I'm not very good. My daughter said you're not allowed to do that anymore, so I won't do the text. But anyway, and Picasso said, what do you mean the way they are? And he said, well, like here. And he pulled out his wallet and he pulled out a photograph of his wife like that. And Picasso held it up and he said, she's rather flat and small, isn't she? So there's a way in which we can have a very rigid view of things and how they're supposed to be, and that small sense of self that we think we know what's real and how things are supposed to be is very limited. But there's something bigger going on than our ideas about it. As I say so often, the question is not the future of humanity, but the presence of eternity. So there is an invitation in the meditation practice. The Buddhist texts begin, O nobly born, O you who are the sons and daughters of the Buddhas, of the awakened ones, remember who you are. Remember your inherent dignity, your capacity for compassion. This is your birthright. And make room let go and make room for this possibility. Because here we are in this beautiful springtime, and there's something mysterious that's also true. As it said, there are some questions that can't be answered by Google, right? Who are we? How do we navigate this? What is this for? This is a Zen story from 3rd grade. Ruth remembers being a girl, daughter of a sharecropper in South Carolina, one of 10 kids living in a little cabin. One day in spring, her 3rd grade teacher said there would be a talent show. Little Ruth went home troubled, thinking, what talent do I have? She couldn't sleep that night, paced the porch before the field. Then the clouds parted and the moon, almost full, filled her face and turned the boards of the porch into blue and illuminated everything with its glorious moonlight. Her little mouth dropped open and she felt like there was something magic and she was a part of it. When asked the next day, she said her talent was seeing the moon. So there's something that we're being asked to do, to see in a more timeless way, to live from that wisdom and that reality. And then as we open that space of seeing in a new way, with a kind of willingness and courage, then we get what Zorba called the whole catastrophe. We get the magnificence of it, and we get the ocean of tears. We get the beauty, and we get the tragedy of it. This is human incarnation. Anybody not have that, by the way? Just one checking here to see. You can have your $8 back, right? Okay. So what do we do then? What we want is to wait for a kind of an opening in it. Like that little girl on the porch not knowing, and then she waited and now the moonlight comes in to show me something new with our willingness. And so we allow ourselves to turn our attention and our hearts and our goodwill to this mystery of who am I? How do I navigate birth and death and gain and loss and pleasure and pain and joy and sorrow? Am I always kind of grasping at this and afraid of that? Or is there some more noble and wise way to move through all of this change? But if you open, as Zorba says with the catastrophe, not only is there the beauty of the moon and the spring, but you also open to the ocean of tears. Your worries for the earth and what we're doing to it, climate change, your own personal grief and sadness for the losses you had, or the anger or the doubt about how to live in this world. And those too are vast. And it's not so easy. Here's James Baldwin, such a magnificent writer and, visionary. He says, "Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within." I use the word love here not in a merely personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace. Not in the infantile American sense of being made happy by stuff or someone. That's quite a phrase, isn't it? Thank you, James. But in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and courage and growth. It's a different meaning of love than the love of gratification. It's the love of willingness to show up for this life fully. And that takes, awareness and attention and courage and love. And periodically, you will die. I mean, yes, you're going to die anyway. That's right. We know that. And we've got the statistics and the mortuaries waiting for you. I promise you, they've got it all figured out. But you're going to have other deaths as you go along. And the person who really being on the way, writes the Zen teacher Kornfield, who falls upon hard times in the world, will not as a consequence turn to those friends who offer refuge and comfort and encourage their old self to survive. Rather, they will seek out someone who will faithfully and inexorably help them to risk themselves so that they may endure the difficulty and pass courageously through it. Only to the extent that a person exposes themselves over and over again to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found within them. In this daring lies dignity and the spirit of true awakening. So spring comes, but it also comes after winter. And rebirth comes after death. And that's the way it seems to work in this life. And you have to let go of this and to move into that. Or you have to go through the dark night to come to some other dimension of being. And it requires a deep trust. Again, Pablo Neruda, that line I love, where he writes, "You can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring." There's something so large that we are a part of life. We are life. That no matter what we do as human beings, there's some bigger force, because we're a part of that, that's going to push the weeds in the grass through the cracks in the stone and the sidewalk. Tennessee Williams wrote, "The violets in the mountains have broken the rocks.